The backyard was alive with laughter, the kind that spills out from a family reunited after too long apart. Balloons bobbed in the warm summer breeze, their bright reds and blues dancing against the green of the lawn. The smell of grilled burgers and fresh lemonade hung in the air, mingling with the chatter of my children, their spouses, and my 6 grandchildren. It was Tommy's 10th birthday, my youngest grandson, and I'd spent weeks planning this day to be perfect. I'd baked his favorite chocolate cake, layered with thick frosting, and strung fairy lights across the patio to make the evening glow. At 75, I wasn't as spry as I used to be, but my heart was full, and my hands were still steady enough to make magic for my family. I stood by the dessert table, adjusting the candles on Tommy's cake, when I overheard it. The words cut through the joyful noise like a knife through silk. "She's too old to keep up with all this," my daughter-in-law, Claire, said, her voice low but not low enough. She was talking to my son, Michael, her husband, as they stood near the picnic table. "I mean, look at her, Michael. She's slowing down. We can't keep expecting her to do these big parties. It's too much." I froze, my fingers tightening around the lighter in my hand. Too old. The phrase echoed in my mind, sharp and unyielding. I glanced at Michael, hoping he'd defend me, but he only nodded, his eyes on the ground. "Yeah, you're probably right," he murmured. "She's not getting any younger." The words stung more than I cared to admit. I'd always been the pillar of this family, the one who held everyone together through holidays, crises, and milestones. When my husband, George, passed 10 years ago, I didn't crumble. I rebuilt. I learned to manage the house, the finances, everything alone. I'd raised 3 children, weathered countless storms. And now, at Tommy's party, I was reduced to too old. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile as Tommy ran up, his eyes bright with excitement. "Grandma Ellie, can we cut the cake now?" he asked, tugging at my sleeve. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I lit the candles, and the family gathered, singing happy birthday as Tommy beamed. But as I watched the flames flicker, Claire's words burned brighter in my mind. Too old. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Not at Claire. Not entirely. But at the assumption that age had diminished me. If only they knew. That night, after the last guest left and the backyard was quiet, I sat in my armchair, the house dark except for the soft glow of a lamp. My mind drifted to the secret I'd kept for years, a secret even my children didn't know. The fund. It wasn't just a nest egg. It was a fortune, built brick by brick through decades of quiet determination. I'd started it after George died, a way to secure the family's future, but it had grown into something far bigger than I'd ever imagined. $1 million, give or take, tucked away in investments, savings, and a few clever ventures I'd never spoken of. I'd planned to reveal it one day, maybe when the kids needed it most. But now, I felt a spark of defiance. They thought I was too old. I'd show them what this old woman could do. The next morning, I woke with a plan. I wasn't going to let Claire's words define me. I'd spent too many years building something extraordinary to be dismissed as frail. But I wouldn't just tell them about the fund I'd show them, in a way they'd never forget. I called my financial advisor, Margaret, a sharp woman who'd helped me grow my investments over the years. "I'm ready to make a move," I told her. "Something big." Margaret's voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the smile in it. "You've been sitting on this for a long time. Ellie, what's the occasion?" I chuckled, a little bitterly. Let's just say I'm tired of being underestimated. Over the next week, I began laying the groundwork. I wanted the reveal to be more than a number on a bank statement. It had to be a moment, a story they'd tell for years. I decided to host another family gathering. Not a party this time, but something intimate, purposeful. I'd call it a family meeting, something I hadn't done since George was alive. I sent out invitations, keeping the purpose vague, and watched as my children and their spouses RSVP'd with a mix of curiosity and confusion. The day of the meeting arrived, crisp and clear, with autumn just beginning to touch the leaves. I set the dining room table with care, laying out my best china and a pitcher of iced tea. My children arrived first, Michael with Claire, my daughter Sarah with her husband, David, and my youngest, Rachel, who was single and fiercely independent. The grandchildren were at home with sitters. This was for the adults. As they settled around the table, I could feel their eyes on me, wondering what this was about. Claire, in particular, looked uneasy, her fingers fidgeting with her napkin. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady but warm. "I know you're wondering why I called you here. It's not often I ask for a formal meeting, but there's something I need to share. Something I've been working on for a long time." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Mom, is everything okay? You're not sick, are you?" I smiled, touched by his concern, but also amused. "No, Michael, I'm not sick. In fact, I'm stronger than you might think." I paused, letting the words settle. "But I've been hearing things lately. Things like too old and slowing down. And I realized it's time to set the record straight." Claire's face flushed, and she looked down at her hands. I didn't call her out directly. There was no need. This wasn't about shame, it was about truth. I stood, walking to the sideboard where I'd placed a leather-bound folder, its edges worn from years of careful handling. Inside were the documents that told the story of the fund, every investment, every decision, every triumph. "I want to tell you about something I've built," I said, opening the folder. "Something I started after your father died. It wasn't easy, but I did it for us, for this family." As I spoke, I could see their curiosity shift to intrigue. They had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how I wanted it. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving that age was no barrier to strength, to vision, to legacy. I took a deep breath, ready to lay it all bare. I held the folder in my hands, its weight a reminder of the years it represented. My children and their spouses leaned forward, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. I could feel the room's energy shift, the air thick with anticipation. I'd spent a decade building something in secret, and now, at 75, I was ready to unveil it, not out of pride, but out of necessity. They needed to see me, not as too old, but as Eleanor, the woman who'd never stopped fighting for her family. "Let me take you back," I began, my voice steady but laced with emotion. "When your father died, I was 55. We'd built a good life together, but we weren't wealthy. After the funeral, I sat down with the bills, the mortgage, the savings, everything. It wasn't enough. Not for the future I wanted for you all, for your children. I could have played it safe, lived quietly, but that's not who I am." Sarah, my eldest, tilted her head, her brow furrowed. "Mom, what are you saying? You've always been careful with money. You told us Dad's insurance covered the house." I nodded. It did. But that was just the start. I didn't want to just survive, I wanted to build something. So I learned. I read books on investing, took night classes on finance, even when my friends thought I was crazy for it. "Eleanor," they'd say, "why bother at your age? But I bothered. I bothered because I believed in our family's future. I opened the folder, revealing a stack of neatly organized papers, bank statements, investment records, property deeds. I passed them around, watching their eyes widen as they scanned the numbers. This, I said, is the fund I've been building for 10 years. It started with a small inheritance from your father's aunt. Just $10,000. I invested in stocks, bonds, a little real estate. I made mistakes, lost some, but I kept going. And now, it's worth just over $1 million. The room went silent. Michael's jaw dropped, and Claire's hands froze on the paper she held. Rachel, my youngest, let out a low whistle. $1 million, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, how did you do this? I smiled, but there was a bittersweet edge to it. By not listening to people who told me I couldn't. By staying curious. By taking risks. By believing I wasn't done just because I was older. I looked at Claire, not with anger, but with a quiet challenge. I heard what you said at Tommy's party, Claire, about me being too old. And I get it, you see the gray hair, the slower steps. But you don't see the work, the late nights, the choices I made to build this. Claire's face reddened again, and she stammered. Ellie, I didn't mean, I just thought the party was a lot for you. I know, I said gently. But that's the point. You assumed. And I've spent my life proving assumptions wrong. I walked them through the fund's history, starting with that first $10,000. I'd been terrified, a widow with no formal training, diving into a world of numbers and markets. But I'd studied, learned from brokers, and made calculated bets. I bought a small rental property in a growing neighborhood, fixed it up myself, and sold it for a profit. I invested in tech startups when everyone said they were too risky, and a few paid off big. Every step was a lesson. Every success a brick in the foundation of something greater. David, Sarah's husband, spoke up, his voice cautious. This is incredible, Ellie. But why keep it a secret? Why not tell us? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Because it wasn't about me. It was about giving you all something real, something lasting. I didn't want you to rely on it, to stop working hard or dreaming big. I wanted you to live your lives. And when the time was right, I'd share it. But after Tommy's party, I realized the time was now. Not because I'm slowing down, but because I'm still here, still capable, and I want you to know who I am. The room was quiet again, but this time it wasn't shock, it was respect. I could see it in their eyes. The way they looked at me not as mom or grandma, but as Eleanor, a woman who'd built an empire in silence. Michael reached across the table, his hand resting on mine. I'm sorry, Mom, he said softly. I had no idea. I squeezed his hand. You weren't supposed to. But now you do. Over the next hour, I answered their questions: how I'd chosen investments, why I'd taken certain risks, what I planned for the fund. I told them it wasn't just for them, but for their children, for education, for emergencies, for dreams they hadn't even dreamed yet. I wanted it to be a legacy, not a handout. But as we talked, I noticed Claire was quieter than the rest, her eyes fixed on the table. I knew she felt guilty, and part of me wanted to ease that guilt, but another part wanted her to sit with it, to understand the weight of her words. As the meeting ended, I felt lighter, as if I'd shed a layer of doubt I hadn't realized I was carrying. My family left with promises to talk more, to plan how the fund would be used. But I wasn't done. The reveal was only the beginning. I wanted to do more than surprise them. I wanted to inspire them. I started thinking about the next step, something bigger than a family meeting. Maybe a foundation, a way to give back to the community that had supported me through my grief. I wasn't just too old. I was just getting started. The days after the family meeting felt different, like the air had cleared after a storm. My children called more often, their voices tinged with a newfound respect. Michael apologized again, and Sarah sent a long text about how proud she was. Even Claire reached out, her message short but sincere. "I'm sorry, Ellie. I misjudged you. Let's talk soon." I appreciated it, but I wasn't dwelling on apologies. I was already looking forward, my mind buzzing with ideas. The fund was more than money. It was a symbol of what I'd always believed, that age doesn't define you. That purpose can burn bright at any stage of life. I wanted to take that belief and make it bigger, something that could touch more than just my family. I spent mornings at my kitchen table, sketching out plans for a foundation. I called it the Eleanor Fund, a name that felt bold but right. It would support education, small businesses, and community projects, things that had shaped me and could shape others. I wasn't just a grandmother baking cakes. I was a woman with a vision, and I was ready to act on it. I met with Margaret again, this time at her office downtown. She greeted me with a warm hug, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You're on fire, Ellie," she said, flipping through my notes. "A foundation. That's ambitious, even for you." I laughed. I've spent 10 years building something in secret. I'm ready to build something everyone can see. We spent hours mapping it out: legal structures, tax implications, potential partners. Margaret suggested starting small, maybe a scholarship program for local students. I liked the idea, but I wanted more. I wanted to fund entrepreneurs like I'd been, people with big dreams and small budgets. I wanted to help single mothers, retirees, anyone society might overlook. I'd been overlooked too, and I knew what it felt like to prove them wrong. Back home, I started making calls, reaching out to old friends and community leaders. I was surprised by how many people were eager to help. My neighbor, Rosa, a retired teacher, offered to connect me with schools for the scholarship program. A local business owner, Sam, wanted to partner on grants for startups. The more I talked, the more I realized I wasn't alone in this. People believed in Minute, just my money, but my story. But not everyone was on board. At a family dinner a week later, I shared my plans for the Eleanor Fund. The kids were excited, especially Rachel, who'd always been my dreamer. "Mom, this is amazing," she said, her eyes bright. "You're going to change lives." Claire, though, was hesitant. "It's a lot, Ellie," she said, her tone careful. "Running a foundation, at your age, it's a huge commitment. Are you sure you're up for it?" There it was again, at doubt, cloaked in concern. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. "Claire, I appreciate you worrying, but I've been managing bigger things than you know for years. I'm not stopping now." She nodded, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. It didn't anger me this time, it fueled me. I'd show her, just like I'd shown them all. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the work. I hired a lawyer to set up the foundation, met with accountants, and even started designing a simple website to share the mission. I wasn't tech savvy, but I learned, just like I'd learned investing. I stayed up late, my dining room table covered in papers and coffee cups, my heart racing with purpose. One evening, Tommy came over after school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Grandma, what's all this?" he asked, peering at the stacks of documents. I smiled, pulling him into a hug. "It's a project, sweetheart. Something to help people. Like I've always helped you. He grinned. You're like a superhero, Grandma. I laughed, but his words stayed with me. A superhero. Maybe I was. In my own way. Not with a cape, but with a ledger and a dream. As the foundation took shape, I started planning a launch event. Something to announce the Eleanor Fund to the community. I wanted my family there. Not just to see the money, but to see what I'd built from Ida legacy of hope, of second chances. The event was set for a Saturday at the community center, a modest space I'd rented for the occasion. I invited everyone, family, friends, neighbors, even the local paper. I wanted the world to know that age was just a number, that a 75-year-old woman could still move mountains. As the date approached, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This wasn't just about proving a point, it was about showing what was possible. The community center buzzed with energy, the kind that comes when people gather for something new, something hopeful. I'd spent weeks planning the launch of the Eleanor Fund, and now the day was here. Folding chairs lined the room, filled with familiar face-me family, neighbors, and strangers who'd heard about the event through word of mouth. A banner hung above the small stage, reading, "The Eleanor Fund, Building Futures, Defying Limits." The words were my own, and they felt like a declaration. I stood at the back, adjusting my navy blazer, my silver hair pulled into a neat bun. At 75, I wasn't trying to look younger, but I wanted to look strong, capable. My hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of what this moment meant. I'd built $1 million fund in secret, and now I was stepping into the light, showing the world what I could do. Tommy ran up, his tie slightly crooked from playing with his cousins. "Grandma, you look fancy," he said, grinning. I laughed, straightening his tie. "Thank you, sweetheart. Today's a big day." As the clock struck 7, I took the stage, a microphone in hand. The room quieted, all eyes on me. My children sat in the front row, Michael and Claire, Sarah and David, Rachel beaming with pride. I took a deep breath, my voice steady as I began. "Thank you all for being here," I said, scanning the crowd. "My name is Eleanor, and 10 years ago, I was a widow with a small inheritance and a big dream. I didn't have a degree in finance or a fancy job. I was just a woman who believed in her family and refused to let age define her. Today, I'm proud to announce the Eleanor Fund, a foundation to support education, entrepreneurship, and community because no one is ever too old to make a difference." The crowd applauded, and I felt a warmth spread through me. I shared my story, not just the fund, but the why behind it. I talked about losing George, about learning to invest, about the nights I'd spent poring over books and balance sheets. I didn't shy away from the hard parts, the mistakes, the doubts, the moments I'd felt small. But I also spoke of the triumphs, the moments I'd proven myself wrong, and the legacy I wanted to leave. Then I outlined the fund's mission: scholarships for students, grants for small businesses, support for community projects. I shared stories of the people we'd already chosen to help: a single mother starting a bakery, a retiree launching a tutoring program, a teenager with a dream of college. Each story was a reminder that potential doesn't fade with time. As I spoke, I noticed Claire in the front row, her eyes glistening. I didn't know if it was pride or guilt, but I hoped it was both. I wanted her to see me, really see me, not as too old, but as unstoppable. When I finished, the room erupted in applause, and I stepped off the stage, my heart pounding with joy. The rest of the evening was a blur: handshakes, hugs, questions from the local reporter. My children surrounded me, their voices overlapping with praise. "Mom, that was incredible," Sarah said, her arm around my shoulders. Michael just hugged me, his eyes saying what words couldn't. Claire approached last, her expression softer than I'd ever seen. Ellie, I don't know what to say. I was wrong about you. This is amazing. I smiled, placing a hand on her arm. Thank you, Claire. I just wanted you to know who I am. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I see you now. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The launch wasn't just about the fund, it was about reclaiming my story. I'd spent a decade building something in the shadows, and now it was real, tangible, alive. But I wasn't done. The Eleanor Fund was just the beginning, and I had more to give, more to prove. The weeks after the launch were a whirlwind. The Eleanor Fund wasn't just a project, Anna Maria, it was a movement. The local paper ran a story about the launch, calling me the grandmother who defied expectations. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out, inspired by what I'd done. Strangers sent letters, asking how they could get involved. I was overwhelmed, but in the best way. At 75, I'd found a new purpose, one that stretched beyond my family and into the world. I threw myself into the work, meeting with applicants, reviewing proposals, and planning the fund's first grants. Rosa, my neighbor, joined as a volunteer, her experience as a teacher invaluable for the scholarship program. Sam, the business owner, helped me vet applications for startup grants. Together, we awarded our first round of funding, a $10,000 grant to a woman named Maria, who wanted to open a daycare for low-income families. When I handed her the check, her hands shook, and she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. This is life-changing, she said, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Eleanor. I smiled, my own eyes misty. You're the one changing lives. Maria, I'm just giving you a start. My family started to see me differently, too. Michael and Sarah offered to help with the foundation, and even Claire volunteered to design flyers for our next event. I welcomed their support, but I made it clear this was my vision, my lead. I wasn't stepping back. Not now. Not ever. One afternoon, Tommy came over with a school projecta family history assignment. He wanted to write about me. Grandma, you're famous now, he said, his eyes wide. I want everyone to know about the Eleanor Fund. I laughed, ruffling his hair. I'm not famous, sweetheart. I'm just stubborn. He grinned. That's even cooler. As we worked on his project, I told him stories I hadn't shared before about growing up with little, about marrying George, about the years I'd spent learning to stand on my own. I wanted him to understand that strength wasn't about money or fame. It was about perseverance, about refusing to let the world define you. The foundation grew, but so did the challenges. Managing $1 million wasn't easy, and I made mistakes overcommitting funds, underestimating costs. But I learned, just as I had with investing. I hired a part-time manager, a young woman named Lila who had a knack for organization. Together, we streamlined the process, making the fund more efficient without losing its heart. One evening, as I reviewed applications, I came across one that stopped me cold. It was from a 70-year-old man named Harold, a retired mechanic who wanted to start a workshop for at-risk youth. His letter was simple but powerful. I've been told I'm too old to start something new, but I believe I have more to give. Your story inspired me, Eleanor. I read those words again and again, my heart swelling. This was why I'd done it, not just for my family, but for people like Harold, people the world had written off. I called him the next day, and we talked for hours. His passion reminded me of my own, and I knew I'd found the next recipient of the Eleanor Fund. As winter approached, I planned a second event, this time to celebrate the fund's first successes. I invited Maria, Harold, and others we'd helped, wanting to showcase their stories. The community center was packed again, but this time, it wasn't just about me. It was about what we'd built together, a network of dreamers, defying limits, proving that potential never fades. The second event was different from the first. The community center glowed with warmth. Strings of white lights draped across the ceiling, casting a soft glow over the crowd. Tables were lined with photos and stories of the Eleanor Fund's recipients, Maria's daycare, Harold's workshop, a scholarship student named Aisha who'd just enrolled in college. I stood at the front, not on a stage this time, but among the people, feeling like part of something bigger than myself. I spoke briefly, thanking everyone for their support and sharing the fund's progress. We'd awarded 20 grants in 6 months, touching lives I'd never imagined. But the real stars were the recipients, who took the microphone one by one to share their stories. Maria spoke of the children she'd helped, Harold of the teens he'd mentored, Aisha of her dream to become a doctor. Their voices filled the room with hope, and I felt a pride that wasn't just mine, it belonged to all of us. My family was there, their faces glowing with admiration. Claire, who'd once called me too old, stood beside Maria, helping her pass out flyers for the daycare. Michael and Sarah mingled with guests, sharing my story as if it were their own. Rachel, ever the dreamer, was already planning a fundraiser for the next round of grants. And Tommy, my little superhero, ran around with a camera, snapping photos for his school project. As the night wound down, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The winter air was crisp, the stars bright above the community center. I thought of George, of how he'd smile if he could see me now. I'd started the fund for our family, but it had grown into something more, a legacy that would outlive me, that would keep giving long after I was gone. Harold joined me outside, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You changed my life, Eleanor," he said quietly. "I thought I was done, but you showed me I wasn't." I smiled, my heart full. "You did the same for me, Harold. We're not done until we say we are." He nodded, and we stood in silence. Two old people who'd refused to be defined by age. I realized then that the Eleanor Fund wasn't just about money, it was about stories. About proving that every life has value. Every dream has weight. Back inside, the crowd was thinning, but the energy lingered. I gathered my family for a final toast, raising a glass of sparkling cider. To defying limits, I said, my voice strong. To never being too old. They echoed my words, their glasses clinking, their smiles wide. As I looked at them, me children, my grandchildren, my community, I knew I'd done more than build a fund. I'd built a legacy, not just of wealth, but of courage, of resilience, of love. And I wasn't done yet.